Okay, so we named our webinar today, I've maxed out design tables, configurations, and equations. Now what? Now, if you read the blog, the basic theme that we're dealing with here is you're someone who wants to try to automate, and actually you've tried it in SolidWorks. Perhaps you've been using design tables, perhaps you've been using lots of configurations, maybe you've been using equations to the nth degree, and you've started to notice some limitations. And what we're going to be doing is talking about just a few of those limitations, and I'm going to show you a real example of what a reasonably maxed out assembly can look like. And then we're going to talk about how our tool DriveWorks Solo can actually address that situation. All right, so here's our agenda. We're going to start with an intro, and just to kind of get us up to date on what DriveWorks is all about. Then we're going to answer this question, what is DriveWorks? Anytime I give a DriveWorks webinar, I always like to spend probably about 10 minutes or so just talking about the DriveWorks suite of products so that you understand context of what DriveWorks is and how it operates and what the different packages are. Then we're going to get into the topic, I'm maxed out, now what? And then we'll be dealing with a specific example, and then what can you do to actually solve the issue. And then I'll talk about what support Fisher will provide you if you decide to move forward in any direction with DriveWorks with us. And then we'll have a Q&A. All right, so a bit of an intro. There was a time when if you wanted to go get your happy little car, you had to go down and see this guy down at the lot. Now, he would be the one that would help you to configure your car. He would help you to see different colors, different interiors, different wheel types, and different sizings of the car, whether you're dealing with a sedan or a compact. And the fact of the matter is, it's really not perfect for everyone, even though this guy's trying to sell that to you. Customers want to be able to get something that's right just for them and configured to what they would desire. But now what you can do, instead of going down to a lot, you can actually go right online, click on the Order Now button on the Tesla website, and order yourself a Model S. And we're actually going to see a bit how to do that later on. But the main thing that we're seeing is that what's becoming more and more ubiquitous in our culture, in the engineering culture, is the ability to configure to order. Now, that's not only true in the engineering space, it has been true for well over a decade with a company like Amazon. I would say that they're the ones that have really spearheaded the entire thing. And now it's becoming part of the culture of how engineering does its job as well. All right, so basically, DriveWorks is a configurator for desktop, mobile, and tablet. It's really going to help your engineers and sales teams and distributors, pretty much anyone that needs to be involved in the product as far as the chain of getting it out the door to the customer. They're going to be able to have a tool that they can use together in order to easily configure, easily price, and easily quote. Now, what you want to think with DriveWorks and whether or not what you guys are doing is appropriate for the tool is that phrase same but different. You're essentially dealing with the same thing, but it's got to be a little bit different. So maybe you're dealing with engineering data, and you're an engineer that is constantly coming up with custom configurations according to what the sales team might need in the field, and they're asking you to hurry up and go ahead and create a different configuration so we can get it out to the floor or get it out to a customer for quote. And that might become tedious after a while. Well, DriveWorks is actually able to help you to solve that issue. Now, I show this slide because DriveWorks a lot of times can be looked at as simply an automation tool just to automate your assembly. But over the years, DriveWorks has developed by leaps and bounds. And so no longer is it just simply an automation tool. It's actually what I'll call an automation operating system. So definitely it'll save you time. It'll also save you money, but there are specific ways that it's going to do that. So it'll start off giving you savings and efficiencies in your engineering department. What's nice about that is that that's going to raise your gross profit because you're more efficient and have less overhead. And then also, it's going to help you to focus your efforts more on new product development instead of creating custom variations of the same product. The big thing, though, is that it's going to be able to increase sales because now you have an automation tool that can help you close the quoting process much more quickly. So DriveWorks can take something that would take hours, days, weeks, or even months and allow you to configure it and have it created at the press of a button within minutes. And so imagine what that can do to your entire sales cycle. not only can it shorten it, but it can impress as well, and then allow the customer in an environment online to be able to configure something, see an immediate price, and even have an upsell experience. All right, so what is DriveWorks? We're going to try to scream through this so we can get to the meat of what we're talking about today. DriveWorks is a tool, again, that lets you configure and automate. And what you see over here is DriveWorks Professional being used in a task pane in order to configure a cabinet and switch the kind of door on the front. And at the end, it's going to spit out not only manufacturing documentation like a drawing, but it'll also spit out documents. Now, that's DriveWorks Professional. We're going to be focusing on one grade level down from that, DriveWorks Solo, today. Now, you bought DriveWorks or you have DriveWorks. How do you set the thing up? So what you can see here is DriveWorks in the SolidWorks environment, and you have DriveWorks Administrator living over in the task pane to the right. Now, the task pane is where you look to use DriveWorks whenever you're in SolidWorks. It doesn't matter which package of DriveWorks you have, and there are three. You have Express, Solo, and Professional. I'm going to go ahead and start this video, and it shows you that you check items off to capture them. You can open them up right from that task pane and begin capturing specific dimensions, features, and custom properties that you like to control. You only have to capture what you want to control. So in this assembly, we're only changing the bracket, but we're capturing the entire assembly so it can be copied. But the only one that's going to be changed in its sizing is the bracket. So this is what DriveWorks Administrator looks like. DriveWorks Solo has a very similar user interface, which we will talk about. But here, this is where, now that you've captured some stuff, you're trying to control that stuff that you've captured. I'll go ahead and start the video here. And what you can see is we're going to make a very simple form. Now, DriveWorks does not use HTML code. It doesn't do anything complex in that fashion. All you have to be able to do is point, click, and specify what the parameters are. You can see that we're changing the maximum and minimum values over there to the right in the properties pane. And it's as simple as drag and drop in most cases. So now we've got a form with which we can control the height and the width of that bracket that we just captured. Let's go ahead and look at how we now have it push values into the dimensions that were captured in the SolidWorks model. So I'll go ahead and play here, and you can see that now we take the same bracket and we're going to attach it to the exact same form controls you just created with a little syntax by double-clicking, and then using the height return and the width return. The syntax return at the end just means it came from a form control. And that little dialog that you saw was just a place where we can click on the very form controls we just created when we were doing that form. Once you've got it set up, the next step is to run it. And then essentially, you're filling out forms. In this case, we're specifying a solar panel. Once those forms have been filled out, the next step is to generate models. You can generate models of any file name that you want in DriveWorks Solo and also in DriveWorks Professional. In DriveWorks Express, you don't have as much control over the file name, but you do create different file names for every single one. You might notice that 2-DW568 at the end. And that's something that was appended to the end of the file name to make it unique every time it creates a custom variation of your models. So you can also put it at the beginning, or you can completely replace the file name. And one aha moment for a lot of people now is, at this point, is you're capable of being able to put sizing information in the name of the file based upon what someone is selecting on the form. Let's say with that bracket, it was a 2x5 bracket. That could become part of the name, and then the next time someone behind you specifies a 2x5 bracket, it won't regenerate it. It'll just pull it from what's already been created and then allow that to be used in the assembly instead. Now, what's great about that is you're not making a million variations and 5,000 copies of the same 2x5 bracket. It only makes one, and you don't have to worry about your server getting all bogged down, but you have complete control over how many files are going to be stored on that server. It'll generate many different file types. It'll do your drawings. It'll do custom documentation of various file formats. And then it'll also give you custom documents that you can create, like a BOM or a quote and so forth. It's the best-in-class SolidWorks automation because if you were to go to your Evaluate tab right now and see what was there, you would find DriveWorks Express and you can start using it. But it's very limited in comparison to the other tools. You have a form designer that will allow you to even publish all the way to the web because DriveWorks can be used in an online experience. And then the rules engine is not in SolidWorks. It's separate from SolidWorks. That way you're not bogging down the SolidWorks tool in order to be able to do your automation. You also have a workflow similar to PDM, Product Data Management, if any of you have that. So you can define where the specification is at what point. while you're specifying. Now, it's not document management, it's specification management. So if you wanted certain things to happen to the specification, like a price change, an email to be sent, and so forth, you can control all of that right with your workflow, including who has permissions to do certain actions. And it's configurable in a 3D browser. Now, it also has really strong integration with third-party systems, and we'll talk about that in a slide here in a minute. Now you have DriveWorks Express, which is the basic version we just covered. DriveWorks Solo has a free 30-day trial and also free training online. And if you're serious about it, definitely you can contact us and we'd be happy to give you a mentoring session or two during your demo time to maximize it. And I usually like to say that at that point, really what we can do is try to get you as maxed out as you can on Solo, so that you can save as much money as you can. That way, if you wanted to purchase the tool at the end of the 30 days, you possibly could with savings you've already created in a real project. And then DriveWorks Pro, that's the highest grades you can get. That's where you're going to be interacting with your ERP, configuring in a 3D environment if you wanted to, and having a lot more powerful form controls and logic in the background to be able to use. So Express is free. You move to Solo in order to have more drawing control and model control, and then you upgrade to Pro and you allow your customers to configure your products to their needs online. So similar to what we saw with Tesla. Now, I'm going to skip there and just talk about how you know you only need Express. If all you're trying to do is drive these things, or make a drawing, or have some basic form controls, that's all you can do with Express. Otherwise, you're going to need Solo or Professional. All right, so DriveWorks Pro is actually a collection of software. Admin is where you're going to be creating your rules. Autopilot allows you to automatically generate your model so you don't have to do it in SolidWorks yourself. It'll do it by itself on a computer with a seat of SolidWorks. And then Live is going to let you throw everything online so that somebody all the way over in the UK or in some different country is going to be able to specify directly from your computer right here in the US. And then User allows you to define a project or define a specification, but it doesn't have access to rules. And if you had more questions about this, we definitely can go over it more in depth with you. And everything works together in DriveWorks Professional in a united environment. So DriveWorks Pro is a collection of software that all works together on an internal network and then has a SQL backend. There's a lot of training, so lots of online resources for you if you guys were to sign up. Would be happy to direct you towards those if you needed them. Now, Pro integrates with PDM, model-based definition by regenerating product manufacturing information on the back end after it makes a copy. It'll integrate with SolidWorks CAM and regenerate G-code and toolpaths and so forth. It'll integrate with Salesforce, SysPro, SAP, SQL with input and output, meaning you can pull information from those databases and push it back in. And pretty much all you need is an ODBC connection, and then you'll be able to communicate with your database. Or if your database receives text file inputs or XML inputs, DriveWorks can actually spit out XML files and also text files and communicate with pretty much any system that's out there. It even integrates with PayPal, believe it or not. All right, so let's get into the meat of what we're here to talk about. You're maxed out. You've got an assembly that is configured in SolidWorks, and you're trying to make use of automation, but that automation is slowing down or you're experiencing a lot of issues. So let's talk about some of the limitations of SolidWorks automation. We're going to go ahead and actually demonstrate. So we'll key right over here to SolidWorks. And then here you see a lightsaber that I designed some years ago now. But this is what I would call a reasonably maxed out assembly. The amount of things to define this guy are pretty high. So I'll go ahead and click on a feature so you can just see how many dimensions we're talking about. So if I come out here, that's just one feature. All of this is connected to a design table, and we're going to see how long this takes. I'll have to tell you a story while it's doing it, because you might need to drink your coffee and wait a minute or so. So I'll go ahead and edit the table in a new window, see if I can get this guy open. While he's figuring out his life, similar, just a really dear customer of ours, Industrial Magnetics, they recently completed a configurator. And their engineer, he's an absolute super genius. He was communicating with the sales team using a spreadsheet, and they actually used it as a configurator. The sales team filled out the spreadsheet, sent it back, after he got the spreadsheet, he actually had it linked to a design table for an assembly. It actually uploaded that information into SolidWorks, configured new equations, or configured the equation to new values, and he was able to spit out a totally different variation. Well, what you guys see here is very similar to that. You've got a design table that it goes out, probably goes out to well past column C, and you can see all the different equations that are necessary to make this thing run. So one thing you might not have known is that you can put different sheets in a design table, so you essentially can make it a configurator if you want it. And I have a lot of different calculations to drive this to a different size. So right now it's the Yoda size. You might have noticed it was pretty tiny. So if we were to go back to SolidWorks, you can see that this guy is not very big. You know, pretty good for a guy who's about 3 feet tall. But we're going to make it a Luke Skywalker lightsaber. And this is very appropriate because we're dealing with DriveWorks Solo. That's your corny joke for the day. So what we're going to do is we're going to reconfigure this guy, go back to sheet 1 to make sure that everything is in there, and then we're going to drag this here and go ahead and shut it down. And then we should be able to see a newly sized lightsaber. Now you can see that this takes a while because it has a lot of chugging that it's got to do. We're really pushing SolidWorks pretty hard. And then now I have a brand new lightsaber of a different size. I have more activator beads. I mean, if you're going to be a Jedi, you have to make your own lightsaber, right? And so I come down here. It even defines the right number of blades that it needs. Now this is based on the idea of just a traditional toy lightsaber. Now I'll go ahead and switch over to the assembly. We're going to let that guy rebuild. Right now it's Yoda, that's why it looks kind of broken, but give it a second and it'll figure itself out. And now we've got the nice Luke Skywalker sized lightsaber. And then it even extends and retracts. All right, now that's something that was done totally with SolidWorks automation. But you saw some of the limitations. That sucker was really slow. Now imagine that I had to configure a lot of these. I'm really spending a lot of time going in, configuring, and making sure that I have the right values, waiting for everything to open up and shut down. Then I have to go back to the assembly and then update the assembly. That really is not ideal. So we're going to come back to our presentation here, and we'll talk about, again, some of the limitations that we have. One, if you have lots of configurations when you're dealing with SolidWorks automation and you're trying to make a lot of configurations quickly, that's going to blow up your file size, and it might lead to some slowness, or it just might be inconvenient that it's so large. The one that we just saw, obviously, was slowness of the file itself, because if you have lots of equations going on, those equations require a certain amount of processing power in order to get their job done, and that processing power is definitely going to cause some slowness in some cases. You might see design table failure. As an example, my design table went out well past column C, CA. And you might accidentally forget something and delete it out, and then you go back, and then you try to add something to your design table, and the sucker's not working. I can't tell you how many times that happened with this assembly, and it was very, very frustrating, to the point where I had to actually redo the entire assembly because I couldn't get it to work. One of the other issues might be drawing issues. So you might find yourself on your drawing having 50 configurations to pick from, and the way that the configurations are structured isn't correct. And so you don't end up with the configuration in the drawing that you thought, and you send out the wrong thing to the field. So these are just some limitations that you might experience that might make you think, well, how about DriveWorks Solo? Now, how would you prepare your models for Solo? So you basically figured, well, I'm maxed out now. I need a better tool. DriveWorks Express is not enough for me. I need to be able to move to something that has some more power to it. So how about DriveWorks Solo? But there are some things you need to consider before you actually start throwing your models in there. Because DriveWorks Solo is more of a development environment. It's not a simple throw your models in and everything is automatically automated. It is going to take some input. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you mate to planes and reference geometry, not faces. Now you guys maybe have gotten an internal ID error in the past. And that's basically saying, well, all right, you told me to swap this model for that one. But when I did, the mates broke because the faces of the one you swapped in don't match the faces of the one that used to be there. You're going to experience the same thing with DriveWorks, because really DriveWorks, all it does is it does SolidWorks' job for it. So instead of you having to right click and choose replace component, DriveWorks does the same thing, but the same rules apply. The internal IDs have to match. So the way that you get around that in DriveWorks is don't mate the faces. Mate the planes and reference geometry. And then you want to make sure that there are common names across replacements. So if I'm going to replace, let's say, a cylinder with of one shape with another cylinder that is more like an ovular shape, but they both have a plane called cylinder plane. You want to make sure that it's named the same thing, and if that plane is what's used to be able to mate it in the assembly, as if you swap one for the other, you're definitely going to end up with what you're looking for. But if you made it to a face, you might not end up with what you're looking for unless you did the old school trick of saving out the exact same component um, and using that as a base to be able to create the other variation that you're looking for. That way the internal IDs would be the same. But imagine how difficult that could be in general to keep track of when you start using DriveWorks. You can use tricks like up to surface extrusions. So an up to surface extrusion can go up to a plane. So imagine now if you decided to put your sketch on one plane and then put a plane out a certain distance from that plane and then extrude up to that surface, then all you have to do is control the distance between the planes and you've changed the size of your part. That's a neat thing to automate because now you have a plane on the left side that you can mate something to and a plane on the right side that you can mate something to as well. Whereas if you just had one plane and just extrude it out blind, you'd only have a face on the other side. Another thing is make sure you get rid of design tables and equations. DriveWorks doesn't need them. And in fact, it can cause conflicts because if you have an equation that's doing one thing and then you forgot and put the same thing in DriveWorks, well, who's going to win? You got to make sure that really you start off with just one set of data that's doing the automating, and that's really what DriveWorks is for. And then the next thing is to transfer your rules, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So there are some cute little tricks that you can do. First thing that we're going to do is just get ourselves used to what DriveWorks looks like inside of the SolidWorks environment. So we're going to switch to a lightsaber that's in a different screen here. And so what you can see is I have DriveWorks open over here. This is DriveWorks Solo. And then DriveWorks Solo, I've captured something. I've basically come down to this feature here called even bead pattern, and I wanted to capture the even bead pattern distance number. So now you can see I've actually captured it up here, and I give it this really funky name, DW Variable Activator B9. Why in the world would I do that? Well, it'll make sense once we're all done and you see all the different little tricks that we're doing. But the reason I call it that is because that's the syntax that DriveWorks needs to be able to interpret something. I'm trying to save myself as much work as I can. So what I'm doing is I'm giving the name that I'm capturing a name that DriveWorks will be able to interpret to automatically look up its value without me having to do any more coding. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now, and that's perfectly fine. So what we're going to do is go into DriveWorks and see what it looks like. So I'm going to click on this button called Show Project Designer. Now you can only access this from within DriveWorks. I'm sorry, within SolidWorks. And right now, it's basically like a glorified design table. I can't switch back to my assembly because I have DriveWorks Solo open. DriveWorks Administrator doesn't have that limitation. It's a completely separate application. But with this one, we do have that limitation. So let me start off and show you down here in Model Rules. You guys might notice that I've captured this one DW Variable Activator B9 here. It does have a value. And this is just where everything shows up so that you can push a value into it. So that capturing that I did, this is the exact same thing just within the DriveWorks Solo tool. Everything that you see here is stuff that you can control about the model. I can control his file name here, where he's stored here, what configuration I'm using here, and what dimension I'm trying to control here. The more you capture, the more stuff that you see here. You can capture features, you can capture pattern instance numbers. I mean, you can capture in assemblies, in DriveWorks Professional, you can actually capture instances. So then you're able to actually control those instances. I mean, the opportunities are pretty limitless when you start configuring here. So this is the model rules area. We're actually pushing data into it. Now, let me come over to my form designer. Now, in the form designer, I have something called bead diameter. It's just one thing that I'm controlling right now. So when I'm all done, you're talking about 50 controls or so, but we're trying to keep it simple. And then over here, it has a very specific name, Activator B3 Return. Again, I'm trying to save myself work, and it'll make sense why in just a moment. And then in the last area, I have some variables that I'm trying to control. They're all called Activator B3, B9, and B15. you might kind of start to figure out that this is all syntax from my spreadsheet that I was using inside of my design table. And that way I can save myself some time. We'll come back and show the guts of what these guys look like in a moment. But for now, I'm actually going to switch over to what I'll call a preparation spreadsheet. Now, this is not the same spreadsheet that I was using in my actual model. This is a copy of it. But I wanted to show you that it's the same old design table, just made a copy, but I'm using this to prepare things for use inside DriveWorks. So first thing is, I know that this is my listing of all of the different things that I need to control. So step one for me is to take this list and actually copy it over here and transfer it. So the way that you can do that is you can actually hold down Control Shift and go all the way to the right, copy this guy, and then I'm going to transfer it and just come over here and just show you how I can do this. Right click and choose Paste Special, and then I'm going to choose Paste Special, and then Values and transpose them. And that's how you get that list to show up here. Now the other thing is I want to use some spreadsheet shenanigans to be able to take this, what this guy is referencing, which is Activator B9, and then I want to parse this down so that it's something that's useful for DriveWorks. We're going to keep it really quick, but there's a little trick that you can do. Anytime that you have something that you want to be able to turn into text, all you have to do is take the exact same thing, copy that guy down. Give me just a moment here. You're going to take the exact same thing. We'll go ahead and copy this guy down, and then I'm going to do a Control Find on this. Now what I'm going to do is I want you to find an equal sign and turn that into just a simple apostrophe. And we'll go ahead and do that here with this guy. So I find an equal sign, turn it into an apostrophe, replace it, and you notice it turned it into text because all it did was find the equal sign, turned it into apostrophe, and made it to actually have real text. Now what I did from there is I take this text and I want to get out of it the exclamation point, I want to get out of it that apostrophe, and I want to get out of it that dollar sign. Well, I use something called substitute. Now basically all substitute is it allows you to say, I want to be able to push one value in for another. I want to substitute in this guy. Let me type my equal sign. I'm going to type substitute, and the first thing it asks for is what's the text that you want to do a substitution on, this text. And then the next thing is that I'd like to substitute out the dollar sign with a blank. Now when you look at this, you notice that the dollar sign is gone in this guy. Well, you can keep wrapping a substitute within a substitute to get everything out. So if you see here, I took out the dollar sign, the exclamation point, and the apostrophe, and I put DW variable concatenated at the beginning, and now I have a nice variable name that I can use inside DriveWorks. So for this specific dimension, what I want to be able to do is come down here and say his variable name is going to be DW variable activator B9. All right, now we're going to go a little faster. This is just an introduction, kind of like a commercial. We're not going to get too stuck in the weeds here, but I'm just showing you that you can use some spreadsheet shenanigans over here as well. I'm calling this guy activator B9, so that's the name of the variable. And then I'm going to take this equation and I want to substitute DW variables in front of this guy, and I use similar tricks here. We're not going to get too bogged down by it. If you want to have even more information about how to do this, I'm happy to have a phone call with you to walk you through even better one step at a time. But I'm using the substitute command here to basically substitute so that finally what we have over here is an equation that DriveWorks can interpret. And you can see it took the equation that was over here, round down B15 divided by B3, and turned it into round down DW variable activator B15 divided by DW variable activator B3. Now I chose activator because I'm on the activator sheet. In a similar way, I take this guy over here and I call it activator B3 return. So these are all just DriveWorks syntax that needs to be used in order for DriveWorks to understand it. So if you understand that at a high level, let's hop back into DriveWorks Solo so that you guys can see how we use this again. So these numbers might not have made sense before, but we're going to go into a chain here. We started off with B diameter. We named it activator B3 return. We just saw how we did that using Microsoft Excel tricks so that we could easily just paste it right in. If you had a lot of controls, all you're doing is creating number boxes and then copying and pasting the proper names into them. The next thing is we've got defined variables, and here go a number of those same things. I wanted activator B3, B9, and B15 because I was on the activator sheet. And then now if I look at this rule, here's that same exact, here's that B9 rule. Here's that same syntax that I just created inside Microsoft Excel. And it looks at DW variable activator B3, DW variable activator B15. That's these guys, B3 and B15. And then it's able to calculate something by simply copying and pasting. This activator B3 actually looks at that return on the form designer. So in other words, this guy right here. And it pulls his value. And then now I'm able to just pull his value into here. And essentially what's happening here is this thing is calculating the exact same way that it calculated right over in the spreadsheet using very similar names. This is B15 divided by B3. This is simply activator B15 divided by activator B3. And all I used the spreadsheet for was to get everything set. Now let's go over to my model rules. This probably will make sense now. This is actually pulling from something called DW variable activator B9. Well, that's the exact name of the variable that I want to pull over here. Activator B9. It just has to have DW variable in front of it so that it knows exactly what kind of thing it's pulling. And we're not going to go over this rule, but there's a really funky rule that automates the entire thing. Basically, what this thing does is it automatically knows what the name of it is. This is DW variable activator B9. That's the name of this particular name here. And it basically pulls that off of the name and then uses an indirect function to be able to pull the variable itself. So that's to show you, basically, if you can get things set up, in summary, if you can get things set up inside of Excel, convert that stuff into language that DriveWorks can understand, and simply copy and paste it into your DriveWorks Solo project, you're going to be able to do things a lot faster than having to put everything in by hand. And then you'll be able to start off automating a lot more quickly. I don't expect that you understood all those steps. Absolutely not. The main thing that I wanted to make sure that you saw is that DriveWorks can do it. And if you're trying to convert from from a SOLIDWORKS environment to a Solo environment, we're going to be able to help you to do that a lot faster. And again, feel free to contact me if there's more information that you want about that. Be happy to walk you through it again. All right, well, let's go ahead and close out here. Let me tell you guys what Fisher provides in general as far as DriveWorks projects are concerned. First thing is we can provide what's called a mentor demo. So you might have heard me say that a couple times. You try the product, and then we help you during your trial phase with a couple sessions just to make sure you're headed in the right direction. You can even try to get you saving money during your free stage as much as you can. Also, we do turnkey proofs of concept, or we mentor you through the process. We'll either do it for you or mentor you through the process. It might be that you're thinking, well, it just doesn't, we're close to purchasing the tool, but we're not 100% sure that it's going to work for us exactly the way that we need. But we have a project that we want to try it on, and it might be a little reasonably significant. So you could either purchase hours from us to do it for you, or to help mentor you through that process. We also do full projects. So if you were to hand us a project, because there was absolutely no resources in-house that could do it, we do have the capability of handling those in-house as well. We do individual training, and we also have full implementation services. So when you get to that stage where it's very complex, we help you with individual or group training. We usually throw people into a class, we don't charge you per individual for the training course, but we charge it per hour for the entire course. And I usually do it over a period of weeks, self-paced, and then we have a group session for 1 to 2 hours where we actually discuss the material. Consider it like office hours. Then I help you develop your team, your milestones, and your project, and then mentor you through the entire process until your whole phase is done. So I've seen implementations of larger sizes take anywhere between 6 to 18 months, depending upon how complex it is. But the smaller projects can be done within a couple weeks or less, depending on how complex your assembly is. So DriveWorks is very scalable and can automate your entire company if you wanted, or automate a block if that's all that you needed. And of course, we offer you technical support. All right, so how about that Tesla? I promise you that we will come back to this website to get a sense of what it looks like. So Tesla's smart. Elon Musk definitely has a good head on his shoulders. So we're going to go ahead and click on a Model S. Here's that Order Now button. You can already see that it's starting to configure things here. We'll let that come up as well. And then the main thing I want you to see is look at the price down here as I change. I'm going to go to a performance, and then the price changes. Click next. You can do neat things like change the color of your car, and it updates automatically. Change the kind of wheels that you have, and we'll just go one more screen, and we're going to change to a different interior. All the while, the entire price has been updating. Now, you can go ahead and click the go button on this, and then have a car shipped to a distributor, and you can pick up your car. That's Configure Price Quote, and that's DriveWorks. I wish I could say that this was DriveWorks. It probably is not. We think that it has something to do with CATIA, and that's still a Dassault product, but DriveWorks would not be running that. So let's switch back to our presentation here and close out. All right, so you can follow us on social media at these different outlets.